Hello and welcome to part 4 of this 4.6 entertainment guided tour. Okay, the last leg of this 4.6 kilometre photo run goes from Covent Garden to Trafalgar Square. It's the longer section, so it's about 1.9 kilometres. And again, it's always best to do this first thing in the morning. Now, the route we're going to take is that we're going to spend a little bit more time in Covent Garden exploring the area. And then when we come out of Covent Garden, we're going to go straight across into Theatreland again, or this area of Theatreland. And we start with the oldest theatre, the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. And then we go down into the Aldwych, go past Somerset House, and then we're onto the Strand. And then we go straight along the Strand, past Waterloo Bridge, all the way down to Charing Cross Station, where we do a little dogleg at the side of St Martin's in the Field, and then we'll be in Trafalgar Square by the National Gallery, and then we'll turn down past Nelson's Column and we'll go and finish up at the tube station. Again, as before, we're going to do this at speed, and the start position of this one is to be on James's Street, which is, or just looking at James's Street from Longacre, with the tube station on our left hand side, and we're just going to continue down there. So as we go down James's Street, we just pass the Royal Opera House on our left hand side, which we just come out of basically, and then when we get to the bottom where the telephone box is, we're going to turn right by the Apple Store and then go around into the plaza itself of Covent Garden. We've got St Paul's Church on our right, and then we go through, in this particular video we're actually going to go through Old Covent Garden Market, but we can go around the side. It really depends on the amount of people who are there. And then when we get to the end, we really just want to go right if we've gone through it, but we want to end up just outside the London Transport Museum. And then we come back and we're just going to go out through Russell Street, straight across Catherine Street, past the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, and then we've got a number of other theatres coming up on our left and right hand side. We've got the Duchess Theatre, Novello Theatre, and then we go left past Waldorf Hotel and then right, and you'll see that there's a little gap between India House, and we go down these small little sets of stairs, and then right in front of us we'll have Somerset House. When we get there, we turn right and we come along the road in here past the Me Hotel in the Aldwych. We cross over that with Waterloo Bridge on our left hand side, and then we're in the Strand and we keep on going down there. We have the Strand Palace Hotel on our right hand side, with Simpson's the Strand on our left, and then we've got the Savoy with the Savoy Theatre, which we've just gone into and out of. Directly across the road is Covent Garden, so that gives you an idea about where we are in relation to everywhere else. And then we have the Vaudeville Theatre and the Adelphi Theatre on our right hand side, and then we've got the Royal Society of Arts just in that little alleyway you just saw there, and then we're coming to Zimbabwe House, and then we've just got the Courts Bank on our right, and then we've got Charing Cross Station on our left and hotel. And then just as we get to this junction, we're just going down Duncannon Street with St Martin's in the Field on our right hand side. And then we get to the end of this road, we're going to be in Trafalgar Square. Then we have the National Gallery on our right hand side, and we turn left, then we're into Trafalgar Square with the fountains, and we have Nelson's Column right in front of us, and then we go round the side of that, and we're just heading off to the island. Just be careful here with the traffic, but we just want to go to the traffic island just because that's going to give you right in the centre of London. So by the King Charles Island, go around that with Admiralty Arch in front of you, and then cross the road, and we're just going to end up at the underground station here. So that's the route. Now we're going to go on a guided tour of the key sites from Covent Garden to Trafalgar Square. So having a look at this last leg of this 4.6 photo run, we're just outside Covent Garden tube station, as you can see here. We're just going to quick look at the historical makeup of this area. If we come and look at the 15 49 map, you can see that the route that we would have taken then would have been, again, within Covent Garden, just gone across the orchards, and then ended up along the Strand, through some people's gardens, and then taken us all the way down to Trafalgar Square. So the last part of the run would be as is today, in terms of the actual geographic route that we take, but the first part would be not there at all. So you can see it has changed quite a bit. And then we can move a little bit more to 1680, and this will sort of show us, again, a map that we saw before, but you can see how well it's been built up following the time when the Earl of Bedford had developed the area, again, at the time of Henry VIII giving over the land. So this is how it looked at that particular period. And the interesting thing you can see if you follow the red line in here, you can see that Covent Garden had been fully formed. It was initially developed in 1686, after the Duke of Bedford managed to get, in a sense, planning permission to plan in this part and get rid of the 3-mile exclusion zone that was going around London to protect the City of London from the plague. So he developed it for high-class living. So he built a huge house called Bedford House, really down towards, it's not really shown on here, but towards Henrietta Street was where the Bedford House was placed. It was a plaza built on the Italian style, and the layout has remained very much the same. So King Street, where we came down from the previous run, is still here, as in Henrietta Street, and we can see the church in front. Now the plaza would have been blank at this particular point. And you can see the main sites where the Transport Museum is today and the Royal Opera House is today and the tube stations are. And as we come out from here, you can see the main road where the theatre is located is still there. It's only when we get down to the Aldwych area that it does change, and then we can see the Strand coming along towards the end. Now if we look at this about how that might have changed by the time we get to 1850, so we're now in, that was Stuart's time, this is Victorian's era, we'll see that, again, not a great deal has changed from that 1860s map. So in terms of the main street coming down, the plaza's still there, the route layout is very similar, still haven't developed the Aldwych at this point, but the buildings have been upgraded, so it would look really quite new at this particular point in some areas. Covent Garden as a market would have been established, and other things that have been pretty new at the time would have been Trafalgar Square. The embankment would not have been built, but we've also got a new bridge down here near Hungerford Market, which was a new suspension bridge. So this is a market to compete with the Covent Garden market at the time. Okay, so that's about the main sort of history. Let's keep on going. So the first port of call we're going to stop at is at the bottom of James's Street, next to the telephone boxes, next to the Apple Store, and then we have the Covent Garden structure we see in front of us here. Now there's a couple of pictures we've got on here, one from 1720, that we can see that St Paul's Church in its form there, big open space, but all the people here are actually going to the opera, so you can see opera was still a big part even at this area of London. The other map we show is in 1820, and this is just before they built what you can see today. So this would be in the old market with the old market buildings. And the building that you see in front of you dates from 1870. Charles Fowler was responsible for this, but he also did the Floral Hall by the Transport Museum, which we'll see shortly. Now there's 2 floors to this building, well actually 3 if you actually go to the top level, and the middle as well as a ground floor. It was a fruit and veg and flower market, and it remained like that until 1974 when it was moved to 9 Elms. But luckily they managed to get a preservation order on it, so it wasn't demolished, and in 1980 it reopened and it has gone from strength to strength. Now if we just go around the front of the building to St Paul's Church, this church is quite interesting for many reasons. It dates back from 1630, from the time when Indigo Jones was responsible for building it. It was one of the first churches to be built after the Reformation, in other words where we detached ourselves from the Catholic Church. But at the time it wasn't the parish church of the area. That took a number of years for it to come together. And in fact, 1645 was when it became St. Paul's. This almost has like a false front, so this looks like the front of the church, but the main entrance is the other side. And this church is also known as the Actors' Church. So we're going to continue down to the Transport Museum. As I said, you can either go through the building and see the different levels and explore the area, or you can go around the outside and then turn left, go past the ivy, and then you'll be at the Transport Museum, which we'll see here. The Transport Museum is in the Floral Hall, and it's been there since about 1980. Originally the Transport Museum was in Acton, and it's also been revamped in 2007 and includes more transportation, both tubes and buses. Also has a Jubilee Market, which has been there since about 1904, but today there's a lot of stalls selling clothes and other items. So we're just going to turn around and we're going to end up at the junction of Bow Street and Russell Street, but we're just going to go straight on into the theatre land of this part of London. So the first thing I'm going to draw your attention to as we cross the road, well, there's a couple of things. Just before we cross the road, there is in fact the Bond in Motion Museum nearby here, which is also worth a visit if you do like to see all the James Bond's cars. It's very entertaining. It's one of my favourite areas of London, so two areas of transport all in one. But we're going to go to theatre now, so just across the road in here, and head towards the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which was the first theatre built by Charles II, the king who brought back partying, and he had his own company called the King's Company and the Duke's Company who performed in this particular theatre. This theatre currently dates from 1812 and is now run by Andrew Lloyd Webber. There's a number of different theatres, just so you can just get an idea. We have the Fortune Theatre, which is just before you get to the Theatre Royal, which was built in 1924. We have the Novello Theatre, which is just here on our left-hand side. We have the Duchess Theatre. We have the Lyceum, which is over to the right, more by Waterloo Bridge. And then we're going to go around the corner and see the Aldwych Theatre. So again, quite a large number of theatres to cater for the growing population of London at the time. Now what we're going to do is, when we get to the end, we're going to be in the Aldwych area. Now there's some interesting things about the Aldwych. Now the Aldwych is a relatively new part of London. It's the eastern borders, so we have the law courts going towards the east, and then we've just got the west end of London starting at this particular point. So it was developed in 1905, again another slum clearance area, but its history does date back to the Anglo-Saxon times. Today you can see it's quite a grand semicircular road, and it has one ex-tube station, 3 hotels, the Waldorf, the Mee Hotel and number 1 Aldwych. It has a massive ex-public building, or still public building, called Somerset House, which is well worth a visit. It has 2 high commissions, the India House and Australia House, 2 new universities, the LSE and King's College, 2 churches, St Clement's Danes from Oranges and Lemons and Mary Le Strand, 2 theatres, Novello and Aldwych, 2 television centres, or ex-television centres. One was Bush House for the World Service and also had ITN Television News. So all that in one place, and you wouldn't necessarily notice going around it. And then there's the whole law courts towards the east. So the new road, when it was put in, improved traffic, it improved access going north. Again, it gentrified the area. And a couple of things to note is that on our left-hand side we have the Waldorf Hotel, which was built in 1908 by William Waldorf Astor. And it is known for 2 things. One is for the tea dances that used to be in the Palm Court, and the others from the Waldorf salad from the Fawlty Towers sketch, which is a British comedy, so it may not everyone will get that. As we move across, we go between the India House, we go through India Place, and then we're looking directly at Somerset House. Now there's several views from Somerset. This is the main entrance, obviously, because the more majestic entrance can be seen from the other side of the Thames. As you go through the entrance, you'll see that there's the Courtauld Institute of Arts, often just referred to as the Courtauld. This was developed in 1932 and is a self-governing college of the University of London that looks after the history of art and conservation. However, it does have the Courtauld Gallery, which tends to focus on French Impressionist and Post-Impressionist art and is well worth a visit. Now, in terms of it being built, again, another similar story in this part of London. Again, the Reformation, Henry VIII's son this time, Edward IV, gave this to the Duke of Somerset. Now, it was a very turbulent time, so when you were in with the king, sometimes it was short-lived, literally. And the same thing happened to the Duke of Somerset, because in 1552 he was arrested and executed for crimes against the crown. So they took the property back from him after he built it, and it became a crown property for many years, and in fact became a royal palace for some time. But like a lot of things, it eventually fell into decline in the 1700s. However, the government then took it over and converted it to the first public building, or public offices, and that included offices for the Stamp Office, the Tax Office and the Naval Offices. It was also the place where all the birth and death certificates were kept until the 1970s. Today it's open to the public, there's lots of exhibitions and there's a great open space where there's fountains in the summer, there's ice skating in the winter and there's cafes and lots of things going on in the area. Now if we turn back, we'll see that we have a church in front of us, and that is called St Mary's le Strand, and as you see it actually in the Strand, so not many churches have that as a architectural feature. But this was one of the 12 new churches that was built specifically in 1714 for London's expanding population. Now if we look in this general direction, you'll see that we've got King's College on our right hand side, built in 1826, but over the other side we'd have to go back to where we just come from, to the other side of the semicircle near Australia House, to where the London School of Economics resides, called the LSE, and that was built in 1895. This has had 16 Nobel Prize winners, but has also had a pop legend in the name of Mick Jagger, who was there for a year before he got more involved with the Rolling Stones. Now, as we get to the end of the Aldwych, we'll be at the junction of Waterloo Bridge, and again you get some views of Somerset House from here. And if we look across the road, we've got number 1 Aldwych, and we've also got the Me Hotel in front of us, and then we've also got the Lyceum to the right hand side and a traditional British pub right at the corner there, so something for everyone. But if we look across the road, we can see that we've got Waterloo Bridge. Now there's some interesting things just about this bridge. It was built in 1817, so that's 2 years after the Battle of Waterloo. So it was originally going to be called the Strand Bridge, but due to the battle it was then called Waterloo Bridge. Now 50 years later, when they built the embankment, that had the effect of speeding up the river, but it also had the effect of speeding up the erosion of the riverbanks. So by the time you got to 1930s, this bridge was getting pretty unstable, and therefore in 1935 they decided to build a new bridge. But then came the Second World War, and this was the only real bridge to be hit by a bomb. The repair of the bridge at the time was mainly repaired and built by women, so this is sometimes called the Ladies' Bridge. Now before we go down towards the Strand, if we just look at the Me Hotel and the building opposite, and I just pop up this old picture of what it used to look like before, you can see that there are some similarities, but you can see that the building on our left used to be the Morning Post, the Me Hotel used to be the Gaiety Theatre, the Waldorf Hotel is obviously still there, but the novella was called the Strand. Now we're going to go along the Strand. Now the Strand is one of the oldest roads in London. It connects the City of London with the palaces at Westminster, and it used to have massive houses on there. So we just go through the list of houses from the other side of the Aldwych towards the east. There was Essex House, there was Arundel's House, there was Somerset House, which we've just seen in here. There was Savoy Palace, there was Durham House, there was Cecil House, York House, Hungerford and Northumberland House. So these were all big houses that faced the river. Their frontage was onto the riverside, and this was the elite of London and the aristocracy. However, the other side of the road would have been reserved for taverns, coffee houses, restaurants, as well as theatre for entertainment, because as everything, when you have a rich centre, there is always other entertainment industries that spring up nearby. 150 years later, John of Gaunt was resident, and he was the father of Henry Bolingbroke, who would become Henry IV, but only after he usurped the existing king, Richard II, in 1400, which then went off to that war between the House of Lancaster and the House of York about who should be the King of England and all its domains. And that lasted all the way up until the Tudors to Henry VII in 1485. In the 1500s, Henry VII made it a hospital, and then it became a barracks, but eventually burnt down in 1864. But when the embankment was built in 1870, that just gave the area a lot more chance for redevelopment. And Richard D'Oyly Carte, from the profits he'd made from the Gilbert and Sullivan plays, decided that he would build the Savoy Theatre and the Savoy Hotel. And this opened in 1889, and it was one of the first hotels in the area to have electric lights and lifts. He also brought in Caesar Ritz to not only set a high level of cuisine, but also a superb level of service, which we see still today. A couple of things to spotlight here. We see the Royal Society of Arts, Manufacturing and Commerce just tucked away in St Adam Street. This has been here since 1754, and interestingly, the patron is the Queen and the President is the Princess Royal. Now, as we get towards the end of the tour, we're just going to bear off by Charing Cross Station. Charing Cross was built on the site of Hungerford Market in 1860, so it's the nearest station to the centre of London. In fact, it's only about 100 yards from the centre of London. And it was built by Charles Barry, who also built the Houses of Parliament. Now, you'll see a lot of the stations that we have in London have a fantastic frontage, and the station is all behind it. But we'll talk a little bit more about Charing Cross Station in another video. We're just going to stop at two other locations before we finish. One is St Martin's in the Field Church, and there's been a church, I think, since about 410 AD, but this church dates back from the 13th century. The current building is around 1726, and that was built by James Gibb. There is a crypt underneath it, and they used to have the crypt as a way of earning more money for the church, so you could bury underneath the church. But today, although the church still has religious services, the crypt is both the tea rooms and a music room for jazz. St Martin's in the Field is also a parish church for Buckingham Palace, Downing Street, the Admiralty, and also the Chinese congregation in Chinatown, or those Christians within that community. And it also does a lot of work for the homeless. So finishing off now, we end up at Trafalgar Square. Again, we look at this in much more detail in another tour. But before this was built, it was the site of the Royal Mews. It would house the horses, the falcons, the greyhounds, all the animals for hunting, as well as the carriages. So when we look at the square, the Battle of Trafalgar took place in 1805, but Nelson's Column was eventually put up in 1843, but the area's been under development for a number of years. So you had the National Gallery there since 1824, and then you've had Canada House in its present position in 1827, but that was from the Royal College of Physicians and a Union Club before it became Canada House in 1925. Then there was South Africa House, which was a Morley Hotel, which was built in 1934. Now, if we have a look across the road where Northumberland Avenue was, there would have been a huge building there called Northumbrian House. But when they built the embankment, they demolished that to make way for the road, and that was built in 1870. So the area is still owned by the Queen, because it still was the Royal Mews, and it is very close to the centre of London, and you get that by going to King Charles Island, and you'll see a little plaque in there to signify where the centre of London is. And again, I'll come back to that in more detail in another video. So I hope you have enjoyed this 4.6 kilometre photo run. There's lots of other runs to do within the area. This is the start of the whole of the sightseeing runs, or one part of them. And I hope to see you in another video. Thank you.